let's check in with Turning Point's White House correspondent, Monica Paige at the White House. Hey, Monica, hope you had a great weekend. Better than former President Barack Obama. Tulsi Gabbard came out and here's the thing. They basically kind of confirmed all of the things that we already knew. This is not news to anybody unless you're like the New York Times or NPR, where you're like, oh my goodness. But Monica, there's so many different layers to this. I would love to, and first of all, I'm assuming that a lot of people understand what's going on. President Trump in 2016 said, they're tapping my phones, and everybody called him a crazy person. And turns out all of that was true and correct. What is the White House saying about this new report from the DNI? And what do you think what is the future gonna hold here?
Well, Jobob, this is a bombshell report, and I understand that maybe a lot of people have already known this kind of information, but it's important that you have outlets like the New York Times and maybe the Atlantic and some of the other left-leaning outlets are made aware of this. This is exactly why
Hmm.
this came out. This is the perfect time to drop a huge bombshell of a report out at this time. But there's two key takeaways out of this, and that's the timeline and the key takeaway, too, out of all of this. And of course, this is predating the 2016 election where they were running an intelligence assessment under former President Barack Obama. And they came out saying that Russia is in no way, shape, or form posing a threat or any sort of influence to our elections. But then former President Obama kind of gathered those same intelligence people at a meeting after the election happened, where President Trump won in 2016, gathered all those intelligence people together and said, hey, let's reassess this for a second. And then somehow, after that meeting, the then DNI, James Clapper, came out tasking the intelligence community to reassess, put out a new assessment, to which then said Russia was influencing our elections with some kinds of tools and actions. And I think that this is where things kind of go awry and where the mainstream media really took that and ran with it. And it really became a weaponization of intelligence and a politicization of intelligence as well. And when you betray the American people like that, can this trust ever be restored? So props to DNI Tulsi Gabbard for releasing this. And what comes next? I mean, the White House has been awfully quiet today. We haven't really heard anything from the president. We know that he has lunch today with Vice President J.D. Vance. I'm assuming this will be a topic of conversation.
Hmm.
And then obviously hearing from Caroline Levitt at some point this week, where we do assume this will definitely be a topic of conversation in the press briefings at some point. But the articles of investigation have been brought forward, all sorts of paperwork that includes this huge report is being brought forward. And now it's in the hands of the Department of Justice, from what I understand. And it's going to be in their hands. So we'll see what comes out of this. We'll see what the next steps look like.
Yeah, and I hope I wasn't burying the lead here, but again, I assume if you're watching Real America's Voice, you're probably pretty caught up on this whole thing. Monica, if you can put on your editorial hat for me for a quick second. I don't want to see an expanse of political prosecutions, right? We saw what happened with President Trump. They just decided, hey, here's the man, let me find the crime. Now, I don't want to get into a culture that has that happen routinely. At the same time, there seems to be a lot of evidence here where the Obama administration colluded, for lack of a better term there, in order to stop and thwart the current president of the United States, President Trump. What kind of burden of proof needs to be exemplified on the conservative side to make it clear to the American people, hey, this is not a prosecution because we don't like President Obama. It's a prosecution because if it were to go to that level, because there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. What has to be kind of the game plan for conservatives putting that out if that were to be the case?
Well, of course, we've seen the weaponization of our government against President
Hmm.
Trump. We need to keep that same energy with former President Barack Obama. Of course, there is some sort of level of presidential immunity, as we've seen. You know how the left was crying, President Trump should not have presidential immunity. Well, presidential immunity ends up being a good thing for the left because then again, Barack Obama will likely be protected from all of this, but it's his people who we should be keeping a close eye on. And we'll have to see what comes out of it because essentially, even though Obama appeared to have been pulling the strings out of all this, you've got to have some sort of accountability. There has to be some kind of consequences for these types of actions because, people don't have trust in the government. And this is a perfect example as to why. So
Yeah.
all eyes will be on this in the coming months for sure, Joe Bob.
Yeah, and we're pretty much out of time, but I did want to play this one clip. It's totally apropos of nothing, but watch this and then we'll say goodbye.
They believe that no one, especially the president, is above the law.
Yeah, and again, that has no consequences whatsoever. Just wanted to throw that out there, Monica. Monica Paige, 30 Points White
Rightly
House
so, Joe Bob.
30 Points White House correspondent Monica Paige. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, you guys.